for the racism which apparently was aimed at Meghan Markle, which is just completely absurd. But by far the most sickening part of this show for me was the constant use of Harry's late mother, Princess Diana, to stoke sympathy for Meghan.
Let me tell you about a man who stood alone in a room full of people screaming at him to sit down, shut up, and take it back. He did not sit down. He did not shut up. And he absolutely did not take it back. Instead, he walked off one of the most watched morning television programs in the United Kingdom, surrendered a salary most journalists spend their entire careers dreaming about, and watched his phone explode with 57,000 complaints filed against him by people who were absolutely certain he was wrong. That man is Piers Morgan. And this week, 5 years after that morning, the world is watching everything he predicted come true. Not slowly, not partially, not in ways that require interpretation, but loudly, publicly, and in real time, in ways that are almost impossible to explain away. So today we are doing something the mainstream media has been reluctant to do. We are laying out the 10 truths Piers Morgan has been stating for half a decade, the 10 arguments that cost him professionally and personally, and we are measuring them against what is actually happening right now. Not what people feel about Meghan Markle. Not what they want to be true. What is actually, documentably, verifiably happening. By the time we reach number 1, your understanding of this entire story will be different. Let us begin. Here is something every good journalist understands instinctively. The most dangerous thing you can do in public life is not make a mistake. Mistakes are human, they are forgivable, and audiences are generous with them. The most dangerous thing you can do is contradict yourself at scale in a short period of time on the same subject, because that is not a mistake. That is a pattern. And patterns, unlike mistakes, are not forgivable. They are revealing. Earlier this year, Meghan Markle sat down for a filmed conversation with a close personal friend. The production design of the interview was deliberate and calculated, soft lighting, no makeup, rocking chairs, the entire visual vocabulary of radical authenticity. This was not an accidental aesthetic. It was a message. The message was, what you are about to hear is real. And what the audience heard was this. Meghan described her life in California as the most joyful, most fulfilled, most purposeful existence she had ever known. She spoke about her marriage in terms that were practically beatific. She spoke about her children. She spoke about her sense of self having finally arrived at exactly where it was always meant to be. She was, by her own telling, completely and perfectly happy. Then weeks later, not months, not years, weeks, she posted a quote to her millions of social media followers about surviving the hardest 7 years of one's life. She posted it twice in a single day. The same message, twice. Piers Morgan counted backwards. 7 years from the date of that post. The calculation lands on 2018, her wedding year, the year she became the Duchess of Sussex, the year she joined the most famous family on the planet, and, by her own subsequent telling, the most damaging chapter of her life began. Now, ask yourself the question Piers has always asked first. How do you describe your life as the most joyful you have ever lived, and then, weeks later, describe those same years as the hardest you have ever survived? Which statement is true? Which version of Meghan Markle showed up for the rocking chair interview, and which one wrote the caption? Because both cannot be real simultaneously. They cannot occupy the same life. They are not two sides of a complicated truth. They are two opposite statements about the same reality, and only one of them can be accurate. Piers Morgan has been pointing at exactly this, the inability of the story to hold its own shape from one week to the next, since 2021. He called it not malice, not victimhood, not complexity. He called it what it is, an incoherent public narrative from someone who has never decided what the truth actually is. In January 2020, Harry and Meghan sat down for what their team presumably hoped would be a controlled, dignified announcement. They were stepping back from senior royal duties. They wanted financial independence. They wanted to live on their own terms, outside the scrutiny and obligation of the institution. The world said, fine. It is your choice. Piers Morgan said, fine. But watch what comes next. What came next was 5 years of a woman who publicly, dramatically, and irreversibly resigned from an institution, continuing to trade on the identity that institution provided. Not in small, incidental ways. In foundational, commercial, strategic ways. The title appears in professional introductions. The royal aesthetic runs through the lifestyle brand like a watermark. Associates and amplifiers within her orbit use language of crowns, of reigning, of royalty returning. And those posts get amplified, shared, celebrated. Piers Morgan made his argument early and has never needed to revise it. The entire moral and commercial architecture of Harry and Meghan's post-royal life is built on one foundation: the fascination and gravity generated by their royal identities. Remove those titles, remove that history, remove the monarchy entirely from the equation, and what remains? A moderately successful actress who retired from television in 2018 and her husband, a man the world would not recognize without the context of his family. The royal brand is the engine. Everything else is the product it powers. And that is fine. What is not fine? What Piers Morgan correctly identified as a logical impossibility that the public would eventually notice, is claiming simultaneously that the institution is cruel, cold, racist, and emotionally abusive, while continuing to extract commercial and cultural value from your membership in it. You do not get to sue a family for the pain they caused you, and then keep accepting the inheritance. At some point, the audience does the mathematics, and lately, they have been doing it. Piers Morgan has argued for years that the most honest thing about Meghan Markle is not her interviews. It is not her documentaries, her memoirs, or her podcast. The most honest thing about Meghan Markle is the commercial record of her various ventures. Because commercial results do not negotiate, they do not perform, and they cannot be edited in post-production. The As Ever lifestyle brand launched with significant ambition and significant resources behind it. The products were presented with a kind of careful personal storytelling that modern luxury branding demands. Candles tied to family memories. Preserves rooted in domestic tradition. A visual identity that communicated warmth, quality, and intentionality. This was not a casual side project. This was the cornerstone of financial independence. What followed was a series of episodes that no publicist on earth could have scripted less helpfully. A high-profile celebrity ally, among the most famous athletes in the world and one of Meghan's most publicly loyal supporters, agreed to film herself unboxing the launch product. This should have been the brand's coming-out party. Instead, it became a viral moment for entirely the wrong reasons. The product arrived damaged. The ally struggled visibly with the content. She admitted on camera to not particularly enjoying the product category she was meant to be endorsing. The video was watched by millions of people, almost none of them in the mood the brand required. Separately, customers reported receiving items that fell short of the quality the price point promised. A resale fashion component of the brand reported sales figures that industry observers described, politely, as modest. The original jam launch, the very first public chapter of what was meant to be a lifestyle empire, generated headlines about labels peeling from jars before they reached their recipients. This is not a collection of bad luck. This is a pattern of execution that does not match the scale of the platform, the size of the deals, the global recognition of the founder's name. And Piers Morgan's point has always been the same. When you have had a $100 million Netflix contract, a $20 million Spotify deal, the most recognizable personal brand on the planet for a 3-year window, and the commercial result of all that is broken product and modest sales, the story you are telling about who you are and what you have built does not match the reality sitting underneath it. Prince Harry is a private citizen. He is not a working royal. He holds no government brief. He carries no diplomatic mandate from the British Crown, the British government, or any body with recognized international authority. He chose this. In January 2020, he and his wife made clear to the world that the obligations of institutional royal life were not something they wished to continue bearing. That is a legitimate choice. Piers Morgan has never argued otherwise. What Piers has argued consistently with increasing frustration is at the moment Harry travels to a war zone and delivers a political speech calling for a specific American foreign policy position, while sitting alongside heads of state and former prime ministers. He is not behaving as a private citizen. He is behaving as a senior royal, drawing on every molecule of credibility and attention generated by a title he formally surrendered, while bearing none of the accountability that title would require of him. The Ukraine speech landed days before King Charles was scheduled to make one of the most significant diplomatic appearances of his reign, an address to both houses of the United States Congress. The palace had spent months preparing for that moment. Every word was weighed. Every political signal was calibrated. The goal was historic, meaningful, and delicate. Harry's speech, delivered in direct contradiction of the stated foreign policy of the sitting American administration, dropped 4 days before his father stood at that podium. The White House responded publicly. The palace was reported to be furious. The British government was not pleased. Piers Morgan said it as plainly as it can be said. If you want to freelance on the world stage using the leverage of a title and a lineage you claim to have walked away from, you do not actually get to call yourself a private individual. You are using royal identity when it serves you and discarding royal responsibility when it inconveniences you. That is not independence. That is having it both ways, and eventually, the people around you stop letting you get away with it. There's an old political principle that applies equally well to monarchies, to boardrooms, and to family dynamics. Sometimes the most powerful statement a powerful person can make is the deliberate, visible, and public decision to say nothing. When King Charles addressed the United States Congress, the largest, most globally watched platform of his reign, he spoke of the historical ties binding Britain and America. He spoke of the cities and counties of the United States named after members of his family. Charleston, Williamsburg, place names that carry the weight of centuries. He did not say Harry. Piers Morgan noticed immediately. He said so immediately. And he named it for exactly what it was. Not an omission, not an oversight, not an editorial decision made in the interest of time. A deliberate, prepared, chosen exclusion on the most public stage in the world, delivered in front of the President of the United States and both chambers of Congress. A man who has spent decades as a working royal knows better than almost anyone alive what belongs in a speech of that significance, and what is not. His team knew. His advisors knew. The speech was constructed word by word with full awareness of its audience and its legacy. The absence of Harry's name was a sentence. It simply was not written in words. The question being discussed privately, and in some cases not so privately, among those who understand the palace, is whether King Charles is considering a more formal and final separation. He removed Prince Andrew from every title, every patronage, every official role, and ultimately from his own. He did it completely. Andrew had never written a memoir attacking the institution from the inside. Andrew had never sat with a global television host for 2 hours detailing the institution's failures. Andrew had never given a Netflix production team extended access to document his grievances against his family. If Charles did what he did to Andrew for what Andrew did, the question Piers Morgan asks, quietly but clearly, what exactly prevents the same logic being applied to Harry? Critics of Piers Morgan often argue that his focus on Meghan's personal relationships is gossip dressed up as journalism. He has always disagreed. His argument is structural, not personal. He is not interested in who Meghan Markle does or does not get along with. He is interested in whether the pattern of her relationships over time forms a coherent picture. And he believes it does. Her father was present, active, and involved in her life until shortly before her royal wedding, at which point the relationship was severed publicly and completely. Members of her extended family have spoken openly about estrangement. Friends described in earlier periods as among her closest and most important have disappeared from her life without public explanation. Senior professionals who worked closely with her during her time as a working royal left their positions in circumstances that generated formal institutional concern. Jason Knopf, who served as communications secretary to the Sussexes and later to the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, put his concerns in writing. Not to a journalist, not to a tabloid, to his direct superior in a formal internal communication. He described specific, named individuals who he believed had been caused serious harm. He used the word bullying. He described a pattern. The email exists. He is a named individual with professional standing and documented evidence. Kensington Palace, an institution whose instinctive preference is always to smooth over, absorb, and bury internal difficulties in the interests of protecting the monarchy, made the unusual decision to announce publicly that a formal inquiry had been launched. Kensington Palace does not do this lightly. Kensington Palace does not do this at all unless the information it has received is both credible and serious. The inquiry's findings were never published, but the inquiry itself was announced. That announcement means something. Piers Morgan has returned to this record many times. Not to be unkind, but because a consistent documented pattern of severed relationships, professional departures, formal institutional inquiries, and written complaints from named individuals is not a collection of coincidences. It is a history, and a person's history does not lie. This is the truth that receives the least coverage proportional to its significance. Perhaps because it is complicated. Perhaps because its implications are uncomfortable. Perhaps because it involves federal law rather than lifestyle branding, and is therefore harder to package into a television segment. In his memoir Spare, published and distributed globally in January 2023, Prince Harry made detailed personal admissions about his past use of controlled substances, cocaine, cannabis, and psychedelic compounds among them. He wrote about these experiences as part of his personal narrative of growth and self-discovery. The admissions were widely noted at the time of publication, primarily in the context of his mental health journey. What received significantly less attention was the following legal reality. Anyone applying for residency or a visa in the United States is legally required to disclose prior use of illegal substances. This is not a technicality buried in the small print. It is a direct question on the application form. Answering it untruthfully, or failing to disclose what has since been publicly and voluntarily admitted in a globally distributed book, constitutes a federal offense and is grounds for deportation. The Heritage Foundation, a prominent Washington-based conservative policy organization, pursued a federal court case seeking access to Prince Harry's immigration documents. A federal judge ruled in their favor and ordered the documents released. 82 pages were produced. More than half were redacted. Piers Morgan has never dramatized this. He has simply stated the facts as they stand. There is an active legal case. There are public admissions in Harry's own words. There is an administration in Washington that has demonstrated no particular goodwill toward the Sussex household. And there are 82 pages of immigration documents, more than half of which the government fought to keep hidden, which have still not been fully explained. The clock on this matter is still running. It has not been resolved. It has not gone away. And it is the one truth in this entire story that exists entirely outside Harry and Meghan's ability to manage, spin, or reframe. When Harry and Meghan departed for California in early 2020, they announced their intention to become financially independent. The word they used was sovereign. They would build their own commercial empire, support themselves through their own enterprise, and demonstrate that the royal family's institutional resources were something they neither needed nor wanted. The commercial deals that followed were extraordinary in scale. A Netflix partnership reportedly worth in the region of $100 million over multiple years. A Spotify deal for a podcast series valued at approximately $20 million. Speaking engagements. Brand partnerships. The forthcoming lifestyle venture. The book deal for Harry's memoir. 5 years later, the picture being described by financial analysts and those close to the couple's situation is considerably more sobering. The Netflix deal has run its term. The Spotify relationship ended without the full podcast series being delivered. A development Spotify's own executives commented on publicly with minimal diplomatic restraint. The lifestyle brand is not generating revenues commensurate with the scale of investment or the name attached to it. The speaking circuit provides income, but not at the level required to sustain the life being lived in one of the most expensive communities in the United States. And then there are the inheritances. Harry received funds from his mother, Princess Diana, held in trust. He received a further inheritance upon turning 40 from the estate of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. People familiar with the couple's financial situation have suggested that these funds, significant but finite, are being drawn upon at a rate that is not consistent with long-term stability. The property the couple purchased in Montecito has not, according to those familiar with the neighborhood, been renovated in the manner typical of homes at that price point in that community. In a neighborhood where renovation at scale is not a luxury but a baseline expectation, that observable fact is read by those who live nearby as a meaningful financial signal. Piers Morgan has always said that the money would be the final and most honest truth in this story. Not because money is what matters most, but because the financial reality is the one truth in a story full of performance and narrative management that cannot be dressed up, reframed, or delivered straight to camera with perfect lighting. It simply is what it is. The Oprah Winfrey interview broadcast in March 2021 was watched by approximately 17 million people in the United States on the night of transmission alone. Globally, the audience was estimated in the hundreds of millions. It was one of the most significant television events of the decade, deliberately timed, meticulously prepared, and executed with complete awareness of its likely impact. Within it, Meghan and Harry made a series of claims about their experience within the royal family. The most reported and most consequential of these was the allegation that an unnamed member of the royal family had, before the birth of their son Archie, expressed concern about what the child's skin color might be. The allegation was framed as evidence of racism within the institution. Piers Morgan stated on live television that he did not believe her. Not I think the situation is complicated. Not I think there are two sides. He said he did not believe her. And then, when asked to retract that statement, he walked off the set and resigned. 57,000 complaints were filed against him. Ofcom investigated. Months later, Ofcom ruled that Good Morning Britain had been within its rights to broadcast his opinion. By that point, it did not matter professionally. The career at ITV was over. Now, for years later, consider what the record actually shows. The specific allegation about the racial comment has never been independently verified. The identity of the person alleged to have made it has never been confirmed. Several of the other specific claims made in the interview about the circumstances of a private wedding ceremony, about the availability of mental health support, about the nature of conversations with palace officials, have been disputed directly and in detail by individuals who were present for the events described. More broadly, the emotional architecture of the interview. Meghan, as a woman so isolated, so crushed, so desperately unhappy that she could not be left alone for fear of what she might do to herself, sits in uncomfortable tension with the woman who,